Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another day of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Sarah. I'm an educator here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. Oh, we got some things going on. I'm from the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California, and I'm so excited to join you this morning. So we are going to be doing a really cool program called Ask a Scientist Marine Mammals. Now, what that means is I can ask you questions because you're all scientists, or you can ask me questions because I'm also a scientist. And that way we can talk about what you want to talk about. Now, I will tell you, I do love marine mammals, especially whales, and I could talk about them for probably hours and hours and hours. But what I really like to talk about is what you want to talk about. So if you have any questions or any animals that you want to see pictures of or talk about, go ahead and text us at 562-286-1838. Now, my friend Sergio is controlling everything you see behind me, including putting up this number, and he'll take those questions or observations or animals or whatever you send us at this text line, and he'll pass it on to me. And that way, we can really talk about and tailor this program to what you want to learn about. Now, if you're watching it live, so it's November 5th at 9 a.m., you can go ahead and text us. If you're watching after the fact, we still would love to hear your questions, and we can still answer them. But we do ask that you email us at live@lbaop.org. And that way, when we're not watching our text line, we still check in our emails and we can get back to you with answers to your questions. All right, so I'm going to start us off by just getting our brains warmed up. It's the morning, it's Tuesday, it's kind of the beginning of the week. So let's sort of get our observation skills going. Now, I'm here, or this right here is Blue Cavern. This is one of our exhibits here. So if you've watched our programs or you visited the aquarium before, we talk a lot about we have these cameras in our exhibits. If you're brand new to our programs, welcome. We're so glad you're joining us today. But to let you know, you can go to our website, and it's on that first page, and scroll down to the bottom. And at the bottom, you'll find links to our webcam. So it's cameras in a lot of our exhibits. So this is our second largest exhibit here at the aquarium, Blue Cavern. It's modeled after a real dive site, which is off the island of Catalina. And it's a kelp forest habitat. So we talk also a lot about making observations. That's a tool that scientists, which all of us are today, it's a tool that scientists use to help them learn things. Now, what I think is cool about observations is maybe you know a lot about a kelp forest. Maybe you've swam in them or snorkeled, or you've come to the aquarium, or you've gone to another aquarium and you learned about kelp forests. You can still make observations and learn new things. Or maybe this is a brand new habitat and it's not a local habitat to you and you don't know a lot about it. You can also make observations. Because when we make observations, we just describe what we see. So I want you to go ahead and take maybe 30 seconds to a minute and make some observations. If you're in class right now and you have paper, you can write them down, or you can think them in your brain and then with your teacher's permission, raise your hand and share them. You can even do sometimes what we'll do here when we have school groups is we do turn and talk, or think, pair, share, where we think about our answers, we turn to the person next to you and share it. Or if you're watching at home, you can just think these things or you can write them down. So what do you notice about this habitat? Now you might be wondering, how does this have to do anything with marine mammals? But a couple of things. One, there's a lot of marine mammals who live in this habitat or near this habitat or benefit from this habitat. But also, when we start to talk about some of those marine mammals, I want us to make some observations. So we're just sort of warming up that tool or that muscle, right? Our brain is a muscle. We have to kind of work it out, just like we work out our bodies to stay healthy. So we're warming up that muscle. What observations do you make or can you make? Now, observations can be colors. Are there any colors you recognize? I see it's pretty blue in here. And a lot of the fish in this habitat are kind of silvery gray colors. I also see some sort of browns and greens right here. Did you notice that too? Good observations. Observations can also be shapes or animals that you recognize. It can also be things that are not living, right? There's living things and non-living things in a habitat. And this habitat needs those non-living things just as much as it needs the living things to be a successful habitat. So I noticed some rocks right here. Those are some non-living things. Did you notice those rocks? So there's some non-living things. And then this kelp right here, kelp is an algae. It's not a plant. It's very similar. Ooh, we got some fun fish swimming around. Now, in general, in a natural habitat or out in the ocean, that kelp would be alive. But here in our exhibit, this is another non-living thing. Even though it represents or it models a living thing, this kelp is artificial in this particular exhibit. There's a couple of reasons for that. Kelp can grow really fast. It also takes some specific conditions. And this way, our animals don't mess with it. We can have it looking nice and beautiful. And any animal who might feed on kelp, we give them the right kind of food that they need. And then the living things, there's lots of fish in here. There's a shark before. And maybe you're wondering, observations can also lead to questions. This thing kind of looks like a stick, which might make you think it's a non-living thing. But actually, that's the tail. It's moving. And it's not moving because the water is moving. It's moving because it's attached to the body of a stingray. So we have two bat rays in here. And this happens to be the tail of one of them sticking straight up in the middle of our camera. All right, any other observations? Remember, you can always text us at 562-286-1838, or you can just think your observations or share them with whoever you're watching with. But I do encourage you, if you have any questions, go ahead and send them in. That's really how we can drive this program. Now, to start, I'm going to let Sergio pick the first marine mammal. Actually, before we get into marine mammal, let's define what a mammal is, right? That's important. We'll give you some time to kind of formulate your questions. I'll give Sergio some time to pick which marine mammal he wants us to talk about first. But I feel like that would be jumping too quick if we didn't talk about what is a marine mammal to begin with. Now, I want you to look around your room, wherever you are, and think about, are there any mammals? Not marine mammals, but are there any mammals in the room with you? Now, I'm looking around my room. I'm in a really small room. There's only two of us in here, me and Sergio. But I know there's two mammals in this room. So if you're watching by yourself, there's at least one mammal, unless you're watching with like a pet dog or a pet cat. If you're in a classroom, you can look around and point at all of your fellow students, as well as yourself and your teachers. We're all mammals. So we are mammals. We're not marine mammals, but we are mammals. Now, examples of marine mammals, we'll talk about what it means, but examples of marine mammals are things like whales and dolphins and seals and sea lions. Now, think about comparing us to a seal or a sea lion, or a whale or a dolphin, or I mentioned a dog or a cat. Do we look like those animals? Not really, not at all. But we actually have things in common. There are 5 characteristics, so 5 things that most mammals share in common. Now, I did say most because there are often exceptions in science. So instead of saying always or all, we say most. So most mammals share these 5 characteristics. And we're going to cover what those are. Now, I'm going over to my document camera because it's helpful to write them down. That way we can keep track. It's only 5, but sometimes that can be hard to keep track of. And because we are talking about marine mammals, and one of them is a whale, we use the word whale as a way to help remember what the 5 characteristics of a marine mammal are. Or of a mammal, sorry, just a mammal. So I'm going to write mammal. So these are characteristics of a mammal. So the first one, the W, is for warm-blooded. Warm blood. Now, have you heard of an animal or someone being warm-blooded before? If you have, go ahead and give a thumbs up. If you haven't, thumbs down. If you're like, I think I have heard that, but I'm not really sure what it means, you can give a thumb in the middle. Excellent. Now, to be warm-blooded, it means that the blood inside our body, going through our body, which keeps us alive, is warm. And that's important because it keeps the inside temperature of our body the same, keeps it stable, and that helps our organs and everything on the inside work really well. Now, on the outside of our body, you might go outside and you might feel really cold or really hot. But the temperature inside your body is going to remain the same. So even if you're feeling hot outside or cold, your temperature inside is going to remain the same. And that keeps everything working really well inside your body. Now, the only time that might change is if you are sick and you have a fever, and then your internal temperature goes up, and it doesn't make us feel very good. So having our temperature be stable on the inside is really important. So the first characteristic of mammals are they're warm-blooded. Now, the second one right here, something that I have a lot of. Go ahead and touch your head. Do you have hair? Now, maybe you have a buzz cut where you shaved your head, but your hair still grows. Or you can feel on your arms you have hair. Even sometimes if you feel your ears, you've got little peach fuzz on your ears. So covering our body, we have hair. So mammals have hair or fur. Now, thinking about some of our marine mammals, you might wonder, something like a whale or a dolphin, do they look really furry or hairy? Not really. but they actually are born with hair on their rostrum or their nose, so the front part of their body. And they have these little hairs that stick out from their rostrum. Oh, here's a good picture. This is a humpback. Now, this is a juvenile or an adult. So it's either a teenager or an adult. But if you take a look at these bumps right here, this is the rostrum. That's the front part of a whale's body. We won't really call it their nose because their nose is somewhere else, and we'll talk about that later. But that front part has those bumps. Those bumps, they've got a really great name called tubercles. Now we can say that all together because it's just a fun word to say, tubercles. And what a tubercle is, it's a hair follicle, which means that from each of these little bumps, a hair sprouts. Now, like a lot of human adults, as whales grow up, they do lose their hair. But when they're born, they have hairs on this front part of their body, and that actually helps them to locate on their mom where they're going to get their milk. So it kind of tickles mom, and it tells her that they're hungry and they're ready for milk, and then mom can produce some milk. So hair or fur is the second characteristic of a mammal. Now the third one is air, which means we breathe air. And I want everyone to take a deep breath. Oh, it feels so nice. It helps relax our body. So it's really important for us to take deep breaths, but even when we're thinking about it, we are breathing, right? We can breathe in through our nose or in through our mouth, and it goes into our lungs. Well, mammals, whether they live on land or in the water, same thing. So those whales and dolphins, seals, all those animals, they do have to come to the surface to breathe. They can't stay underwater forever like a fish or a shark can. They need to breathe air because they have lungs. So air is our third characteristic. Now our last one is live birth. Now I want you to think, now maybe you don't remember from when you were born, but you've probably heard stories from the adults in your life. Did they mention that you were hatched out of an egg? Probably not. Because humans, as mammals, we give live birth. So you're born alive. You're not hatched from an egg. If we think about animals like reptiles like snakes or lizards or birds, they lay eggs and then the animal hatches from an egg, or even fish or sharks lay eggs. But mammals, they give live birth. So there's no hatching from an egg. If you think about an animal like a blue whale, which is the largest animal on the planet, they are about 100 feet long. And if they were to lay an egg, that egg would probably be the size of a car. And they'd have to sit on an egg the size of a car for like a year. But they have to breathe air. So it just gets complicated and it just sounds confusing and ridiculous. And so marine mammals and mammals on land, they give live birth. And then the last characteristic is that mammals, they drink milk. Now, we say drink milk, but for here, for our little word here, I'm going to say eats milk. I'm going to say or drink. Now, for us as humans, we drink the milk. And that's true for most mammals. But when it comes to things like whales, the milk that whales are feeding their young is really thick. It's almost like cottage cheese or pudding. So you can't drink it through a straw. It's really, really thick. If we were to eat it, we would need a spoon to eat it. And so whales are actually eating their milk as opposed to drinking it. But they do feed their young milk in whatever form that is. So here we've got the 5 characteristics of what makes a mammal a mammal. Warm-blooded, has hair or fur, breathes air, gives live birth, or eats or drinks milk. Now, we are going to be talking about marine mammals. So when we add that word marine in front of it, right here, that just means the water. So marine mammals are mammals whose livelihood depends on the water. Now, we here in Southern California, we live near the beach. And actually, everyone depends on the ocean for oxygen. But marine mammals, their shelter, their food, where they're finding their mates, all of that comes from living near or in the ocean. And I say near because polar bears are actually considered a marine mammal. Even though they aren't spending as much time in the water as, say, a whale, who never leaves the water, or a sea lion or a seal who are in and out, polar bears, their livelihood depends on that ocean for survival, and so they are considered marine mammals. All right, now that we've established what is a mammal, and more specific, what is a marine mammal, I'm going to let Sergio pick our first marine mammal that we're going to dive into exploring. Excellent. I had a feeling this would be the first one that Sergio would bring up. Has anyone seen this animal before? Now remember, you can always text us in your answers to my questions. You can ask new questions, share observations, and you can text that into 562-286-1838. What animal is this? Now, it's a very cute animal, but if you live here in Southern California, we don't have these animals living here in our local waters. Now, this animal does depend on a kelp forest. So that habitat we were looking at, Blue Cavern, at the beginning of our program. But we don't find this particular animal in our kelp forests here in Southern California. But if you drive up our coast to Central or Northern California, and then up into to Oregon, Washington, Alaska, you will find sea otters. Excellent. Did you think it was a sea otter? Wonderful. So sea otters are definitely a marine mammal. If we go through our list, they are warm-blooded. They have hair or fur. Absolutely. Look at all this hair or fur. We'll talk more about their hair or fur because it's very important for our sea otters. They do breathe air. You can see their cute little nose right here. And they'll come up to the surface to breathe. They actually spend most of their time at the surface of the water. They do dive down to feed, but a lot of times we see them kind of floating at the surface. They do give live birth, and they do feed their young milk. Now, let's talk about their fur. So sea otters, they are marine mammals, but something that most marine mammals have, and I say most again because this is going to be one of our exceptions, most marine mammals living in the water can't get really cold. In cold water, a lot of whales and dolphins live in colder water, seals and sea lions too. And so they need ways to stay warm, right? They need ways to survive. And one of those ways is surviving in cold water. And so most of these marine mammals, they have blubber. Have you heard about blubber before? That's another fun word to say. We say it all together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Blubber. Blubber is a fancy term for fat. It's a thick layer of fat that these animals have on their body that keeps them warm. Now, for us as humans, we can put on jackets or a sweater or a scarf or a beanie, a hat to stay warm as it gets colder. But these animals, those clothing items wouldn't really work to keep them warm. It would cause a lot of other problems for them, swimming and surviving in their habitat. So instead, they have a layer of blubber in their body. Now, for whales, that blubber can be like 2 inches to a foot thick, just depending on the type of whale and where it lives. But otters, they are one of the only marine mammals that doesn't have blubber. So look at their body. They don't have a lot of extra fat on their body. Sometimes for like seals, you can see all these rolls, which is really important for them. That's their blubber. But otters, oh, look at that. This is Parker, one of our sea lions here. And you can see all this extra skin. That is part of the blubber layer underneath. And that's really important to keep him warm in cold waters. But otters, they don't have blubber. They do have a little bit of fat on their body, as every animal does. But they have to find other ways to stay warm without that layer of blubber. One of the ways is their fur. So look at how furry this animal is. Now, it kind of looks like their fur is 2 colors, and that's pretty common, especially for older otters. So it's not an exact science. It doesn't tell the exact age. But most otters, as they grow older, their face, humans, fur goes kind of grayer. And so younger otters tend to be more brown, covering their whole body, and older otters tend to be a little bit more gray, the front of their body, not necessarily towards the back, but just sort of at their face. But you can just see how much fur this animal has. We estimate is if you make sort of this size shape, like the size of a quarter, and you were to look at a quarter size shape on an otter and count how many hairs they have in there, they have about 1 million hairs in that small space. Which, if we were to take 1 million hairs, that would cover a dog's body. So a dog has about 1 million hairs covering the whole body, like a large dog, like a German or a lab. Those are pretty dogs. If we took all the hair from one of those dogs, it would only cover about a 1/4 inch of an otter's fur. Now, I think I've got some otter fur we can take a look at my document camera because it's really interesting. So it's not only that they have really thick fur, but it's the way sort of their fur is, I don't know if designed is the right word, but here's fur. You can kind of even see from here, it's pretty thick. But if I zoom in, give my camera a minute to adjust, it's got this sort of under layer that's a little bit lighter in color. Can you see that? And then it's got this outer layer. So underneath is, call it kind of like downy fur. Like it's really, really thick and soft and kind of fluffy fur. And then the fur on the outside, it is still very soft, but it's a little more coarse than that fur underneath. And so the way that it works for the otter to keep them warm is when they go in the water, you might see air bubbles coming off their body. And that's because the fur is so thick that that way the water travels through causes all those air bubbles. And this outer layer will get wet. But because it's so thick, it protects this downy layer that doesn't get wet, and that keeps the body nice and warm because that downy layer is closer to the body. So this part stays warm while this part might get wet, but because it's so thick on the outside, it keeps those hairs underneath, or that fur underneath, dry, keeping the otter's body nice and warm. Now, another thing you'll notice about otters, and maybe we can have Sergio find a video, is sometimes when otters are on land, now out in the natural habitat, out in the wild, we don't often see otters come onto land that often. But you'll see this behavior when they're floating on their backs in like little inlets or bay areas, especially in Monterey Bay or Morro Bay. You see a lot of otters, and they will be lying on their back, and it looks like they're scratching their body. They kind of go like this a lot. They rub their heads a lot. And at our aquarium or another aquarium where you see them out on land, they do that a lot too. Now, it might look like they're really itchy. So here's a good video. I actually took this video in Morro Bay. So watch this. Look at this otter. Looks like he's given itself like a nice spa day, right? Just kind of like scratching and massaging its head. But what it's really doing is preening or cleaning its fur. It's making sure that all that fur is not tangled or matted. There's nothing in it that would affect it when it goes back down into the water looking for food. So it makes sure all its fur is nice and fluffy. It even looks pretty fluffy. You can see here on its belly how this fur is wet versus the fur on its face. Oh, I just love it. It just looks like it's so nice to like rub your face and your head and give a nice massage. But they'll do this a lot of the day. They'll spend, and they'll do it for their whole body. So right now this otter's just doing its head, but maybe later it'll go to its belly or its sides or even its back. And you can see, look at all this fur. So do you see how it's kind of pinched? So that wouldn't be really good if this otter was going swimming and their fur was kind of pinched like that. So before the otter goes back in the water, they're going to kind of mess with all that fur, fluff it up, make sure it's nice and clean, so that when they do go back into the water, it's going to work to protect its body from that cold water. Oh, here we've got another good video. And this is a baby otter, which just makes it even cuter. If I did this with my hair, I would just have a giant frizzy mess. And it would not serve me very well. But look how good this otter is at making sure their fur is nice and ready for them to go back in the water. Ah, so cute. Look at his little tail. Now, otters are probably one of the most popular animals that we have here at the aquarium. They are definitely a crowd pleaser because they're so cute. And even these behaviors that look really cute to us are really important. So this otter isn't showing off trying to be cute. It does happen naturally for them. But they are protecting their body, making sure that they are going to be safe and healthy when they're going into the water. All right, I could keep talking about otters, but we are already running out of time. As I mentioned, I could talk about marine mammals for hours and hours. So let's switch gears and talk about a different marine mammal for a couple minutes. Ah, excellent. Now, another one of my favorites. Now, I will say that as much as I love marine mammals, whales are my favorite. One of my jobs here at the aquarium is I coordinate our Whale Watch Naturalist program, and I was a naturalist on the boat for 2 years, which means I got to go out on the water and talk to guests who would come on our boat about the natural world, which included whales a lot of the time. Now, I would tell you it did not include orcas a lot of the time. We do see them here in Southern California, but they're more of a rare sighting for us to see killer whales. But I did get to see a lot of amazing things and learn a lot of amazing things along the way, and it definitely increased my love of these marine mammals. But let's talk about these animals for a moment. So you can go ahead and make some observations. Now, I did in that last sort of couple sentences call this thing by two different names. And you'll hear them referred to as orcas or as killer whales. I'm going to try and call them killer whales. That's actually the more appropriate name to call them, the more common name. But either one works. Both of them identify the same animal. So what do you notice about our killer whales? Or what do you know about whales in general? Because they're really interesting animals. They are marine mammals. They do fit all our characteristics. They breathe air. They give live birth. They drink milk. They are warm-blooded. And as we talked about at the beginning, they do have hair. What else do you notice about this killer whale? The color pattern is really interesting on this animal. And that's actually something we see a lot in whales, dolphins. We see it in some other marine mammals, some seals and sea lions, kind of just depending. But this two colors to their body, right? The back of our killer whale is black. The belly is white. And this is something called counter shading. And that is a type of camouflage. Now, maybe you've heard the term camouflage before, or maybe you know what it means. You haven't heard the term, but camouflage is to blend into surroundings, which is a way that a lot of animals either protect themselves to hide, or they use it to sneak up on their prey. So counter shading is a type of camouflage, and it protects the animal from the top and the bottom. So think about this, or something in the water, and we're looking down from the boat that's really dark, which means the back of this animal is going to blend in. Or if you're below the water looking up, like if you look up in your house or your classroom, you might see bright lights and it's kind of hard to see because it kind of hurts our eyes a little bit. Well, that belly is going to blend animals below the orca, and so it protects them from both sides. Now, you see the color pattern. It doesn't always have to be black and white, but it often is. It's like birds, but lots of birds on one side and light on the other. As I mentioned, fish, sharks, whales, dolphins. We see it a lot in nature, and maybe you'll notice it more now that we've put a term to it, that counter shading type of camouflage. Now, something else about whales. We mentioned how they breathe, or we mentioned that they're breathing air. And I mentioned that their hair, when they're babies, kind of grow out of here, but we don't call this really their nose because their nose is actually on the top of their head. So let's see if we can get a look at it. Any other kind of whale, we can see their nose. So we call the nose of a whale, we call it their blowhole. So it doesn't work the same way our nose does, where we can smell with our nose and breathe. It's solely used for breathing. So this right here is a gray whale, and their nose is right here. Now it's kind of covered, we've got all this other stuff here, which is lice, which I know sounds alarming to us humans, but it's not so bad for whales. And there's barnacles, so other things living on this whale. But right behind it is where their nose is. That's where they're breathing from. Now whales, as I mentioned, we call it their blowhole. And actually, if we think about whales in history, ancient whales, their bodies looked very different, and their nose actually was here. But as whales evolved, they slowly had their nose moving towards the back, and then now it's on the top of their head, which actually makes them really efficient breathers. Because think about when you're swimming, sometimes we swim, we'll turn our head this way, but we have to come almost all the way out of the water to breathe, to get our nose out of the water. But if your nose was on the top of your head and you're swimming, if you're swimming like freestyle, you wouldn't even have to get your nose out of the water to breathe. But if you're underwater completely, you just have to come up to the very top of your head. So whales don't have to come up all the way out of the water to breathe. They can just stick their blowhole out, and that allows them to breathe. Now, something interesting about blowholes is they're all going to look a little bit different depending on the type of whale. Now, whales, or whale is sort of a general term, but there's actually two groups of whales. And we've actually looked at the two of them right now, or already. So this is going to be a gray whale coming up to the surface to breathe. There, it looks like it. Oh, good. That was a good view of those two blowholes. So as I mentioned, there's two groups of whales. We have toothed whales, which an orca is a type of toothed whale, which means it has teeth in their mouth. And then we have baleen whales, which is what a gray whale or humpback whale was. Which is the whale we look right here is a humpback whale. And what they have in their mouth is this stuff called baleen right here, which is made of keratin, which is the same thing our fingernails and our hair is made of. But it acts as a strainer to strain out the water. You can catch tiny little food. So baleen whales eat things like small fish and krill, which are tiny shrimp. And the way that they eat is they'll open their mouth underwater, pull all this water into their mouth, and then they'll push the water out. And the water will pass through these baleen plates, but the food gets stuck on the inside, and then they'll lick it all off. Now, I won't go too much into it because we're going to go back to the breathing, but it's important to talk about these two groups because their blowholes come into play. So not only do the blowholes, oh, here we got a good look at the orca's teeth right here. So not only the blowholes, depending on the baleen whale, look a little bit different, but if we're looking at the blowhole of a killer whale, we're only going to see one opening. So kind of like just one nostril. If we're looking at the blowhole of a baleen whale, like a gray whale or a humpback, we're going to see two openings, just like ours. So if you don't know what you're looking at, but you're looking at a whale, you know it's a whale, and you can see their blowhole and you see two openings, you know that inside that whale's mouth is going to be baleen. If you're looking down and you just see one opening, here, we'll see the two here. Wait for it. It'll be kind of right here towards the end of the screen. Oh, too far. Right there. Two holes. Just like our nose. But if we're looking at a toothed whale, you're only going to see one opening instead of two. So two openings at their blowhole means baleen in their mouth. One opening at their blowhole means teeth in their mouth. And that's true for all whales, which includes dolphin species. So orcas are actually the largest dolphin species. Now, they don't just have only one nostril. They actually have two nostrils, but the other one is inward, and it helps them with echolocation. Have you heard of echolocation? Echolocation is another thing that whales use to communicate and find their surroundings. So only toothed whales can use echolocation. None of our baleen whales with the two blowholes, none of them use echolocation. Only our toothed whales with one blowhole. But the way echolocation works, here in the orca head, they've got this fleshy part of their head right here, and they make these clicking noise. And that blowhole, that second blowhole, is kind of pinched and it closes, and that creates those clicking noises. And those noises are vibrations. And the vibrations travel through the killer, and then they hit whatever's in front of them, and then those vibrations come all the way to the killer whale's body, and it's actually absorbed their lower jaw. This gets really complicated, but basically absorbs their lower jaw, sends a picture to their brain. The important thing to know for echolocation is it's specific and detailed. So an orca or a killer whale can make all these noises, vibrations bounce off whatever's in front of them, come back, and they're able to get a picture of how far that object is in front of them. So if I'm echolocating, send out these noises, I can tell how far Sergio is sitting from me. I can tell the shape and the size of the body and how fast he's moving. It gives them a really good picture of any predators, or more importantly for orcas, any prey in front of them. It allows them to know how fast their prey is moving so they can adjust their speed, the size, how much energy they're going to need, or how many on their team they work in groups they're going to need to take down the prey, and also how close or far they are from it. So echolocation is an incredible adaptation, something that helps an animal survive in their habitat that our toothed whales are able to use to help them survive in their habitat. All right, we are over time already. As I said, I could go on and on. And if you have more questions, we would love to answer them. We have a lot more marine mammal programming on our YouTube channel. So if you want to watch another video, you can just search Aquarium of the Pacific marine mammal or whale classes. Or you can text us, email us, and we'd be happy to answer your questions. All right, everyone, we have another program coming up at 10 o'clock. I believe it's called No Bones, No Problem. So we're going to be switching gears completely and talking about animals with no bones, vertebrates. And Sergio will be teaching that one, and we hope you tune in then. Bye, everyone.